Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you take time to listen into the podcast. Really appreciate you. And because you've been listening, you helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. Really appreciate you. And as our way of giving back, we started a new website. Well, it's not so new now, but relatively new for you to come and get more resources. It's leadershippurposepodcast.com. Leadershippurposepodcast.com. So check it out, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for today, I'm talking with Anne Janzer. And let me tell you about Anne. She's a nonfiction book coach and author of multiple award-winning books on writing, including The Writer's Process, Writing to be Understood, and The Writer's Voice. She guides authors and writers using the concept of servant authorship. I love that. Or writing to serve a specific group of people with a meaningful message. And she has books and audiobooks and blogs and so many things that you can find on her website, annejanzer.com. Welcome, Anne Janzer.
Thanks, Robin. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. We get to have this conversation. We've had conversations in the past, but this one, I think we'll have more time to talk than we normally do. All right. So I just read a little bit of your bio introduction. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, or as much as you want about you, and then your work?
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I spent most of my career actually as a freelance marketer, working in the tech industry. And in that work, I was mostly writing. I was doing a lot of writing for hundreds of different tech companies because I get bored easily. So working as a freelancer was perfect. And I think I'm also maybe unemployable at this point. So being self-employed, very good. But then I started writing. I wrote my first book called Subscription Marketing when I was really empowered. I was really thinking about this idea that I felt people weren't paying attention to, which was how the subscription model changes the practice of marketing. And yet nobody was changing the practice of marketing, right? So my first book was a mission, to get this message out. And I wrote that, and I discovered just how much I enjoyed the process of writing books and writing in my own voice instead of writing in the voice of random corporate executives, which was always a fun challenge too. But I really kind of got hooked into this new way of writing and writing books, and had made a major pivot in my career. And this is what I'm doing now. So I'm coaching nonfiction book authors who may find that same joy and fulfillment in doing books. And I continue to write books myself. I'm fascinated by writing and by cognitive science and what that tells us about writing and reading and how we communicate with each other. So that's always a theme that's running through my work, is a little bit of that research and study in psychology.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I can even feel the passion as you're talking about it for the writing. I mean, I think I do a pretty good job in writing, and I write, but, I can't say I have that same passion that you have. So I'm fascinated by that.
The passion, Robin, is for communicating. The passion is, when we write well, the words resonate. You hit that resonance with someone, and it's like, that's what the passion is for when that happens, right? So
yeah.
it's worth toying with the writing to make that happen. That's for me what it's about.
I get it. All right. So now I just like to hear how this all came about. I know you said you started with the marketing and writing. Was there early in your life, like little Anne, were you wanting to be a writer when you were little Anne? I grow up, I want to write.
Oh, yeah, sure. I was in a really bookish household, so yeah, of course I love to read. And, I had probably the dream, little kids have of being an author. You're going to just write these books and go around and do signings and just live this life in this beautiful desk with tea and, right. I mean, we all have this image of what that is, or we did as kids. The cruel world has taught me that's nothing to do with what being an author is. And I never thought I'd kind of get here in this roundabout way, but that's all fine. That's the way dreams are. They turn out to be different, but definitely more exciting, I suspect, than what I dreamt at as a little kid. But yeah, my family was very bookish. We still are for Christmas. I'm going down to the bookstore and we all send each other books across, and my children give me books and I give them books. It's just books flying around the world. So I still come from a family of readers and people who really enjoy books. So that was probably in my genes from the get-go.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that because many people don't know early. So you're kind of lucky, even though you sort of had a more fantasy version of what it looked like, but you're still doing it and you
Yeah.
still, where was it consistent? Like when you went to school, was writing still on your mind, or was there a time in your life where, I mean, I know it took a different
Yeah.
shape when you went to marketing, but was there a time when you veered off the path, so to speak?
Well, so I was an English major in school, although I took computer science and I took human biology. I very nearly got the degree in human biology, but I just stopped short of the deep study in a specific topic. So I have wide-ranging interests. But then I was faced with, do I work in publishing, which would have paid, this much in the Bay Area, or do I go into technical writing, which was, probably twice the salary. So I went into that, and that sort of got me on the path. But there was a point, Robin, when my children were young. So a while ago, they're not young anymore. um, when I thought I'd love to write a book, so I kind of came back to this, and it was going to be nonfiction because I was afraid of fiction. But I kind of started it, and then I kind of got psyched out by it. The imposter syndrome, I listened to it and I dropped it. And looking back on that, it's like, oh, I wish I'd had somebody there saying, Anne, no, do this thing, right? I really wish I'd had someone doing that. So one of the things I do try to do with authors is make sure that they don't let some of those doubts, some of those things stop them when I can tell that, they have a book to write. They can certainly write a book, and I know that it will be a transformative thing for them to do. So I did, I took this little, backing off a while ago. So it took me a while to get to this phase of doing this. And I assume, I believe that in our lives, all of our threads end up reconnecting somehow at some point, right? You have a thread, you drop it for a while, it comes back. That's just how life is. So,
Yes, I think so too. It's like connecting the dots when you're drawing that picture as a kid, connecting the dots. The picture it's not linear.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not linear. Yes, that's so true. Boy, yeah.
So because this might be an inspiration to somebody who's listening, is why I'm asking this question. So that time when you had that imposter syndrome, how'd you get from that point to actually doing the thing at some point?
So I put it aside, and it was an entirely different book, that I ended up writing. And how I got to it was, by this point, by the time I wrote my first book, I just had a lot of faith in my writing process. I mean, I've been doing this professionally for decades, and I'm like, I can write, not worried about that. Hadn't tried to write a book, so there's that, I wonder what that's like. But and bless him, my husband was like, you can definitely write a book. Yeah, of course you can write a book, just no question. And just that little extra bit of, yes, you're right, I can. I also had the mistake, and this is something that if you're this sounds like you and you're listening, learn from my mistake. I kept waiting for the great book idea to come, right? And it doesn't work like that for me. Usually I need to be engaged in the topic before the real book presents itself, before the ideas really develop. I really think deeply by writing, and you may be too. You have to be swimming in it before you really see what it is you need to do. So sitting and waiting for inspiration is a fool's game. That's not a good strategy. Yeah.
Yes, I can relate to what you're saying too. Yes, that absolutely would
Yeah.
be ideal to wait for inspiration. And then another fantasy that I had was, I just go on a writing retreat for whatever amount of time I needed by myself and write that way all the time.
Yep. Yeah, that's the fantasy of the perfect time, the perfect setting. Oh yeah, well, I'm going to wait for the perfect idea and the perfect time. It's like, oh yeah, you're not going to write a book because there is no perfect time.
When I have nothing else to do, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, when does that happen? I mean, maybe some lucky people can make it happen, but most of us, we're slotting it in. We're making it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if you have other interests, you have a variety of interests and life and
And
things.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, life
Right.
and
Exactly.
business and yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. All right. So now which one is your most recent book?
My most recent book is called The Writer's Voice, uh, Techniques for Tuning Your Tone and Style. And this one was a little different. I started out writing it as a book with an accompanying workbook. And I thought, oh, heck, who wants to just read a book on writing voice? We need to do it. We need to work with it. So I smushed them together. I made it a workbook with a lot of substantive content, with some really fun, crazy exercises, because why should this not be fun? It absolutely should be fun. Just to encourage people to play with their writing voice, to have some sense of what's the real uh, what's the real range of my writing. I think we all have more communication skills than we give ourselves credit for.
Mm.
And it's really fun to just stretch yourself and see what that sounds like, and try this and see what that sounds like. So I've created the writer's voice is a bunch of, it's 10, 12, I know how many, 12 different ways of looking at the idea of writing voice and doing experiments around the idea of writing voice.
Oh,
Some are very concrete, like sentence length, and some are very more inside your own head. But it's all, just looking at different perspectives on it, and how might you play with these different levers and strategies, and see what your voice really sounds like, and how you might stretch it, and how you might change it. And maybe you'll start ghostwriting because you have so much fun. You can just switch voices like you switch shoes. I mean, that's fun. So, so that's what that book's about.
is there a place for personality in the voice?
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
separate from the technical pieces.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, writing is this extension of speaking, right? I mean, that's where it came from in terms of language. Language began as spoken language, and then we wrote it down. So yeah, personality, I think that's really important for us to learn how to express aspects of our personality in the voice, especially in a world of AI generated content.
Yeah.
Let's do human to human connection. And to do that, you have to be willing to let bits of your personality show through when appropriate. I mean, there's appropriate for everything, right? There's situations where you're going to show up differently.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you, and maybe it might not come readily, and that's okay. Can you think of an example of either from your own personal experience or from the someone you've worked with where you saw a change from how they were using their voice or their awareness of their voice, like a before and after?
so what I often see is I'll speak to someone, and I'm like, oh, this person has a great sense of humor. They're kind of funny. They're very, straightforward. And then I see what they write, and it's like, oh, who is this person? It's filled with all these abstractions and complex things. And I'm thinking, this doesn't sound like, my friend here. This sounds like a different person. So sometimes we, it's like we put on a different persona when we pick up a pen, and especially when we're writing a book, right? It's like, I'm going to write a book. It's time for me to get authory, and I'm going to, spin out these long sentences, and I'm going to do something really long, or go back to how I wrote in my college papers. And that's not always the best idea. So sometimes I will just try to help people get out of their way again. It's like, well, I don't understand the sense. How would you tell it to me? And they'll say, oh, well, I'm saying bop, 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 bop. It's like, well, you could write that, the reader might really like that if they just encounter that instead of this, because then they can understand it much more easily. So, so I will sometimes help people know that it's okay to use what feels like a natural voice in their writing, or to use more of it than they do, to know that it's okay, and maybe it's what their reader needs. When you mentioned that in the intro, my idea of servant authorship, and everything comes down to what does the reader need from you, and what do they, if you're in a situation where you're trying to give, and maybe you're in a situation where someone wants absolute expert professional, they don't want to see any part of you, but they're in this very frightening thing, and they want you to come as the full voice of authority. So then, yeah, don't put your personality in there. Be as professional, as straightforward, clear, but whatever is possible, right? Everything has a situation. And the reader has different needs in different situations.
Yeah, and I do really appreciate that concept of the servant authorship and really thinking about the reader or the group of readers.
Yeah.
Do you help people, or how do they know who the reader is and to get into the mind so then they could serve that group or that reader?
Most people, when they stop and think about it, they know, or they know one of their audiences. They may not know who all their audiences are. I mean, my first book, I was totally wrong about the audience. Well, I knew who I was writing it for, but it was picked up by instead of marketers, it was picked up by customer success professionals. So like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. But they know. The problem that most of us run into is that we want our book to be for everybody. And, of course, that's just very hard. And I was just talking to someone about this just yesterday and working on her book as she's articulating who she's writing for and why. And she's like, well, I don't want to just turn away other people. So maybe I should be broader as I think about it. It's like, well, if you think about, if I'm thinking about writing for Robin, right? I get to tune into all my sort of automatic communication skills that I've been developing my whole life, right? I'll think of you and I know how to write, to speak to you in a way that is warm and supportive. And whereas if I'm picturing a mindless masses, it's like, I'm going to dial back and start talking, it's harder to be in that warm personal space because it's a mindless mass, right? So there's a really compelling reason to try to picture a specific person or kind of person that you're addressing, because it helps you be a better writer. And it doesn't necessarily shut out the other people at all, right? They'll read it and they'll think, oh, that's a lovely warm voice, or, whatever. I mean, if you serve one group very, very well, you're likely to serve a larger group of people as well. So it's not an exclusionary thing by any means. It's just a trick for making the writing easier by using more of your innate communication skills.
Yes, and anything that makes the writing easier is always good.
Precisely. Yes, always the objective.
It's always a good thing. All right, so now you were sharing with us from your expertise. Now let's put on your author hat. I could kind of imagine, but tell us, what is the most rewarding thing, or what has been the most rewarding thing for you as an author?
Yep. You know this too. It's when somebody contacts you and lets you know that your work has made a difference. I wrote a book called The Writer's Process on sort of the psychology of writing, and a college adopted it for a freshman writing course, and an adult student took it. And the professor sent me the paper that she wrote about it, because she was so afraid of writing herself. It always was so she took this course first to get it out of the way as an adult going back. She was a single mother. She had a teenage son who had like dyslexia and writing issues, and just writing was oof. And she found that it just changed her whole perception of it. And then she worked with her son, and now he's worried. So it's like that for me was like, I'm done. I'm a successful writer. Heck with those bestsellers lists. This has this is my definition of success. I have impacted 2 people's lives, one woman's college career. And, that was just, beyond words. As you know, when somebody works with what you've given them and it has a meaningful impact on them, that's servant authorship. That's why we do this. And that's my measure of success.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's a tremendous difference. And I mean, that's an illustration of one. And I love that professor took the time to send you the paper.
Yes. Wasn't that sweet? It was just really lovely that he did that. The whole thing. It was just a highlight.
Yeah.
It was a highlight.
That's wonderful. Okay. And I thought, like, if people who are listening, who are authors, this is a reminder when the times are challenging to go back to those times where it's rewarding to keep going in the tough times, to appreciate it in general, but also to keep going in the tough times.
Yeah.
So now for you, what has been either or both the best thing that you've done to get your book or one of your books or all your books out there, or what has been one of the biggest challenges in getting your book out there? So you can answer either one or both of those questions.
Okay, one or both. Yeah. So it's always a challenge, as you know that. In terms of, the hard part is writing the book is not the hard part. It's it's getting it out in the world, getting your ideas out in the world. And I've certainly been learning through trial and error. Always experimenting. One of the most fun ways I've done that was with my most recent book, The Writer's Voice. And I'm going to share this with the group because I think there are lessons for everyone here, which it had all of these exercises. So I got a group of people who were in my writing community who agreed to do these exercises, and then who agreed to be on my launch list. And we did videos about the exercises. And so when I launched, it wasn't just me, it was this whole group of people. And I was able to spotlight, oh, this person, he writes this stuff and he liked this exercise, but let me point you to his novel. I was able to make this a group thing. So that to me was my very favorite book launch, was my most recent one, where I really had this lovely group that went through it with me, and were so supportive and fun, and it took so much of the pressure off the whole thing. So that was my most successful.
I love that. I love that. Were they doing it as you were writing it, or you waited until the end and you said, let's go through these?
So first I got a group of people who did the exercises as I was writing. And I think I really overestimated. I was like sending them these things weekly and they're like, no, it's too much.
Here's your homework for the week.
Yeah, I think I may have worn out my welcome there. So I stopped that. But then I went back to this group and said, okay, now I got this whole book together. Would you like to see them? Would you like to do this? And those who had already committed and done some of the exercises were definitely interested in seeing the book. So it was kind of early on, I got their feedback. They all filled out feedback forms about what they liked and didn't like, it helped me really fine tune those exercises. Because again, I needed to make them simpler. I needed to make them, easier in a sense. And I just needed to not pile on as much. So that was really useful.
Yeah, that was good to
really
know.
useful. And then it gave me a group of people who were already, my launch team was a superset of that, but a lot of those people were involved in the launch team. So don't go alone. Don't try to market a book alone. It's definitely can be a team effort, and it's so much more fun when you have help along the way.
Yes. And you have won multiple awards. So I'm guessing you figured out a way to get the book out there in some way, because somebody knew about it in order to give you these awards.
Yeah, well, mostly these were awards that you apply for. I'm going to just put that right out there. You can apply for awards, and then it goes into a pile and they get judged and evaluated. So you put that out there if you've done it, so you have a little social proof. For my first books, I applied for more awards. I kind of stopped doing it more recently because it's like, I don't know, do other things instead, because I think I have some social proof already. I suspect that's really it. But we need, people, I'm certainly not a household name. So you try to find ways to take the risk out of buying a book from this person that you don't know. And so when you are publishing a book, you're looking for ways to help people feel that, you're an authoritative person, or you might be worth reading. And but a word is sort of a shortcut to a bunch of reviews. If you get on a book and you see it has hundreds of reviews, you're like, yeah, okay, this is probably a pretty good book. Yeah. Other people have read it and seem to like it. And that's what we do as human beings. We look for that sort of proof.
Yeah, we do it with everything. We do these days. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So now the podcast, when I created the podcast, I created for what I call high achieving women.
Uh-huh.
And here's my definition of it. We probably have our own, people listening have their own definitions of it, but here's what I mean by it. High achieving woman is a woman who is ambitious, goal-oriented, professional, responsible at work in her business, responsible at home, such that people at work and home come and ask her questions, may not be related to anything she does, but she's the one that they go to ask the questions. And she's good at a couple things. She's kind of really good at it, and they see it. So they think that she doesn't need support because they see that she's doing all these things and she's good at a couple things.
Yeah.
So I thought, and then on top of that, they may have written at least one or more than one book.
Yeah. Yep.
I see you nodding. And so the podcast is for a woman who fits any part of that description. And I thought, who supports them while they're supporting everyone else?
Yeah, that's true. I think, we have to find support. And that's something that has taken me quite a while to learn, to ask for help, to get help. I don't know what that is about. It just, I should be able to do it all, right? You hear that in your voice in your head.
Yeah, because we're used to doing it.
We're used to it.
If you're the one that typically, if people are coming to you and you're the one, then you feel like that's your role. You're the one.
Yeah. But if you're writing books, or if you're planning to write a book, or if you're supporting books you have already written, right? All of these are things that are very tough to do entirely on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, it's, a book is a container for your ideas, right? And those ideas spread better with more help, with more people, with, that's how ideas spread in multiple people's heads. So you should not be afraid to find people talking to a similar audience, to find people who are complementary, to work with coaches, to get colleagues, to get writer colleagues that you support each other. All of these things, to learn and experiment with each other, because it's just too much to do entirely on your own. It's just a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot.
It really is. Okay, so now that was sort of the part of the question that I wanted to ask, and you gave some very helpful hint on that. Now, is there anything else you can say to the woman I described that from either your professional life or your personal life to add to this idea of supporting each other as well?
Okay. Let me say this. So women like that, if they're women like me, I was kind of brought up to be a rule follower. I look for those best practices and I try to learn what they are and do what they are. And I have found great strength and results from questioning established practices, right? So question the established wisdom. This is what I'm going to tell all you women listening, especially when it comes to books and publishing. Please, don't take everybody's word for what the best thing is to do, but question it, because the publishing industry is changing so much. The world is changing so much. So why would we assume the best practices from 5 or 10 years ago are the things that we should be doing? No, your reader is changing. Your reader and your audience. So you can think very creatively about how you promote your book, about how you get your ideas out there, about what your book should even look like, right? I mean, I ended up doing sort of I really wanted people to pick up a pen and write this voice book. That was my goal for them. So I made it 8.5 by 11 and made lots of lines in there and check boxes and things, so they'd just be enticed to pick up their pen and write. That was my goal. So I would say question the established wisdom that you hear. Give yourself permission to question it and experiment and see what works, because you may know better than what an expert says, or what was the right thing 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of your, helping people find their writer's voice. This is a form of that as well.
Yeah.
Not just in the writing, but the whole process.
Yeah. I come to, people come to me and they just have this really, idea that I want to write something like this. I worked with a woman recently and she said, she wanted to write a book, about her subject for someone who was not an expert in it. And so great. And she sent me her outline. It looked like a textbook for this. It's like, well, that person's not going to want this. We have to let go of that assumption that this is what this kind of book, this is what all the other books on that subject look like, but they're not for your audience. So let's rethink it. And she did an entirely different, really fun format, and it's doing very well for her. And I'm just so pleased, So just question those assumptions, and they may be just assumptions you don't even see. They're just sort of hidden in the way that you think or approach the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm imagining that just liberated somebody.
Yeah. once that happened, the book, she just wrote the book like bing bang bing while she was working full time. She got through it in a few months, and it's like, okay, so it was liberating.
Yeah.
To let go of other people's rules for what you should be doing, right?
Yeah.
Definitely liberating.
Yeah. So I believe it's liberating for her and people who are listening right now.
I hope so.
All right. So the podcast is Leadership Purpose. Do you think it's important to have a sense of purpose in your work? If so, why? If not, why not?
Yeah. So I do think it's important. I think when it comes to writing, the purpose comes from me that servant authorship of what's the difference I'm trying to make with this communication. What's the difference I'm trying to make? And that becomes a key to unlocking so many of the questions that we have in writing a book and publishing a book and promoting it. It also becomes a huge motivator, right? Because it gets us out of our own heads. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is hard. Oh, well, somebody's not going to like it. All of these things, who am I to write on these subjects? These are all real things that go through our heads, right? They're all real.
Yes.
It's like, doesn't matter if someone doesn't like it, because I know there's someone out here who needs this. Doesn't matter if it's hard, because I know there's someone who needs it. I'm not going to sit and perfect it for years on end out of fear of letting it go, because the longer I do that, the longer I'm withholding it from the people who are going to find real value in it. So it gets us out of our own heads. And so a purpose in terms of how you're serving is the purpose that for each project, I really try to keep going back to that as a touchstone, because it's so helpful to me personally, not only for the project, but it gets me out of my head, gets me out of getting stuck in, diversions, digressions, procrastinations, all of those things.
All the things.
All those things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. All right. And you've been generous with your time. Is there anything that I didn't get a chance to ask you, that's something bubbling up in your mind? If not, it's okay. But anything you want to say before we tell people again how they can be in touch with you?
No, I think, the one thing I would say to those of you who are kind of waiting on, it's like, I'm waiting for that perfect time, and I'm waiting for just the perfect idea, or I'm not even sure I can write a book. Well, you can definitely write a book. That's the wrong question to ask. The question is, what book should you be writing that's going to have an important impact on other people and on your own life as well? That's the question. So don't wait. Just please start. That's my one thing I just want to put out there.
Yes, don't wait, just start.
Yeah.
All right. And now where can people be in touch with you if they're reaching out? Say, I want to hear more. This was, they're compelled by this conversation to be in touch with you. Well, how can they reach you?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested. My website is my name, ANNE Janzer at AnneJanzer.com. My email is Anne@AnneJanzer.com. I have a YouTube channel where I'm starting to put up a few little videos, just trying to get better with video, because I'm always learning and experimenting. So you might find me there too. But yeah, find my website. There's a contact page, or you can just email me at Anne@AnneJanzer.com. And I'd love to talk to you about your book if you want.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to come and have this conversation and share with me and all of us. I really appreciate it. And I'm inspired I was grabbing the nuggets of wisdom as you were speaking.
Good. Well, thank you, Robin. We always, you're always full of nuggets of wisdom. So I'm delighted to have this conversation with you.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks again.
All
Okay,
right.
everyone. And I would love to hear your response to the episode. You can find me on social media. I'm on all the channels, but I'm primarily on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out the most. So you can just send me a message at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. That's my social media handles. And I'd love for you to check out our website. The podcast has a website, leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com, where we are planning to use the website as a hub, as a support for high achieving women, as I described earlier in the episode. And so if you are one who is in a place in your life and work where you're lacking and you're feeling a sense of not having enough meaning and purpose, we'll have resources for you. Or if you're an author and you're trying to get your book out and spread your message more, we have resources for you, especially if you're thinking about turning your book into a course. So we're going to set up the whole podcast as a hub and continue to evolve with that. So love to see you there. LeadershipPurposePodcast.com, LeadershipPurposePodcast.com. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.